Hello, I'm Angelyn Spignesi, Coplik Ardent, and I will be reading my lyrical analysis of Chapter 9, which I entitle Crib, White Curtain Covering. First, I'm going to read my summary of my lyrical analysis of the chapter, and then I'll follow that with my synopsis of the chapter, and follow that with my lyrical analysis. So here is my summary of my lyrical analysis of Chapter 9. In this chapter, Helen continues rising up and out of body to death. This is the sacrifice necessary when the Brocklehurst possession spreads so that the collective body becomes diseased. The Helen sacrifice is the sacrifice of who would ascend and not be able to return her gift to body. Now, Jane has enough of a base in her own transformed Gateshead hate not to go under the Brocklehurst ravaging. However, she's not yet ready to move from what she has learned, her gift, her wisdom, to the world. Instead, she romps there only on the surface, which is a necessary step, but not the ultimate one. For before you move your gift that you found in the temple back to and through your body and into the world, you have to face death, the human limit. And that is another level of understanding suffering. So to resist Brocklehurst's infection means not to come up against it or retaliate, but to resist it by having a related connection to the ascended heights as well as the depths through a solidified body. And that allows you to hold fast as the archetypal forces move through. I apply metaphors of the blossoming spring and photosynthesis here in the lyrical analysis. The Helen death is the necessary sacrifice of whom would prefer the gift remain above, detached from body, in an essential father idealization, and not to suffer the betrayal by her actual father. Helen is who can see the configurations of other world and their meaning, yet cannot manifest her vision, cannot return it to body and world, since that would mean entering anger and ardor. The Helen sacrifice, the sacrifice of what would keep female vision disembodied in a father idealization, is necessary for the transmutation of the Lowood lesson down into body and world. Miss Scatcherd no longer is necessary if you learn what it means to carry love, hate, and suffering, both out from a temple embodied, not diseased, not slattered, or neglected body. Helen's vision begins its return, her resurgence to the world, when the larger body, larger community takes notice of the scourge, and that occurs in Chapter 10. So now I'll read my synopsis of Chapter 9 of Jane Eyre. Crib, White Curtain Covering. Spring, air softened and swollen feet returning to themselves, walk now, pleasant recess. Through what are becoming floral paths, I venture outside the high-spiked Lowood walls, and the wood receives me. This wood had been ravaged by the wintry elements, beck whirling to a raving. Now it slowly eases to its gurgling. The wilder rain and slashing had left trees only skeletons, yet here in May, quote, Lowood shook loose its tresses. It became all green, all flowery, end quote. Sunshine grounded in its wild primrose plant as these skeleton trees become embodied, quote, majestic life, end quote. I romp with more liberty than ever since Lowood lying in its cradle of hill and wood, fog of that cradle, carrying the typhus, and many within, more than half the 80 girls have no resistance through, quote, semi-starvation and neglected colds, end quote, are struck by the infection, disease penetrating, institution now hospital, teacher as nurse. They are packing up those girls with any family could depart. While inside prevails the camphor and pastille, many die, buried quickly and quietly as the days a more striking blue, tulips and roses, the scent of sweet briar. They permit the few of us who are well to exercise fully all day. Away in the wood, we are the gypsies. And there is more food for us since all rules are lifted. The Brocklehurst dare not approach. We carry our slices of bread and cheese, thickened slice, to the wood. My friend there, Marianne Wilson, shrewd and witty, always flowing from her a narrative for which she has a bent. She is older and she knows the world. She informs me on what I like to hear, while with my turn for analysis I question. And in our wood spot and pleasure we chat. Yet where is the first friend, Helen Burns? Certainly this Marianne is not of that one's higher taste. For in the wood she can only offer me amusing stories, and many a time we indulge in, quote, racy and pungent gossip, end quote. Had I left my Helen for such? No. Of many defects I am, yet that first friend still held for me the more sincere attachment. Quote, as strong, tender, and respectful as any that ever animated my heart, end quote. But Helen is ill, not of typhus, but with what they call consumption. And I am ignorant of such things. I am sure it is not serious, and she soon will recover. We had strayed far away that day, Marianne and I, gotten lost in fact, and it is after moonrise that we return, seeing first the surgeon's pony. Someone is quite ill, probably dying. I decide to remain outside longer in the garden, to plant the roots I have carried from the wood. These roots cannot wait until the morning, and I wonder what it is for the one there about to die. And for the first time, my mind tries to apprehend what it has learned of this heaven, this hell, of what is death, and my mind, quote, recoiled, baffled, and for the first time glancing behind on each side and before it, it saw all around an unfathomed gulf. It felt the one point where it stood, the present. All the rest was formless cloud and vacant depth, and it shuddered at the thought of towering and plunging amid that chaos, end quote. The front door opens to a nurse and a surgeon who departs, and I go to that nurse and I ask, how is Helen Burns? She tells me not well, not here long. The day before I would have thought she was going to return to her own home in Northumberland. Yet now I know it in an instant. Helen is going to the, quote, region of spirits, end quote, and I receive this news of her dying with shock of horror, then grief, then desire. I ask what room. She is in Miss Temple's, I hear. I cannot go near. Instead to bed. It is 2 hours later at 11, all around, finally slumbering, so I climb out and negotiate those passages. I know my way, and I grope now in the dark, assisted by a window here and there, descent to the lower portions, closing 2 doors, then mounting a staircase, and here is the room, door ajar for any fresher air. I push the door back, and fearing to find death, I seek Helen. I see a nurse sleeping beside the crib placed close by Miss Temple's bed, still empty as that teacher ministers in the room of fever. I am pausing by this crib's side, fearful to look inside its white curtain. Is my friend dead? I speak first her name, and she answers, pulls back the curtain. Her face is pale, yet looks so little. My fear subsides. They must be mistaken. Can it be you, Jane? She is composed. She speaks my name calmly, too calm to be dying. I get into the crib. I kiss her. She's very cold, but her smile is of old. She knows how late it is, heard the time strike, wonders why I have come. I tell her it is to see her, that I had to speak to her. It is time to say goodbye then, she says, for I have come just in time. I ask her if she is going home, and her reply is that it is her last home. My distress now tears, and she is seized with her cough. When we both still, she notices my bare feet, tells me to lie down, cover myself with her quilt. Her arm is over me, and I nestle close to her. After a long silence, she whispers that she is happy. I must not grieve. The illness is gradual, not painful, and no one will regret her leaving. Her father is remarried, will not miss her, and she does not have the qualities to do well in the world. She is avoiding much suffering through this dying. She tells me, do not grieve. I ask her where she is going, and here it is to God, who never destroys what he creates. She will be restored to him, God her Father and her friend. In her whisper, she loves him and is loved by him. I ask her whether I will see her when I die. Oh yes, she affirms that I too will be received by, quote, the same mighty, universal parent, end quote. She is dear to me, and I do not want to let her go. My head tucked in her neck, and soon she is whispering how comfortable she is, and that now she can sleep, and asks me not to leave her, likes having me near. I will stay with her. I say, dear Helen, no one can take me away. And to that her question, am I warm, darling? Good night, say each. She kisses me, I her. We then sleep. Strange movements, and I am being carried in the arms of the nurse. No one reprimands me for having left my bed, nor do they respond to my many questions. Yet it is a day or two that I learn how Miss Temple, returning that evening, found me in the crib by her bed, my arms around Helen, who was dead while I slept. For 15 years her grave covered only by the grassy mound, but now gray marble marking inscribed her name, end quote, resurgam, the word, end quote. So now I will start my lyrical analysis of this chapter 9. And I will begin with a lyrical section entitled Typhus. Typhus. He has not allowed a clean place for our desire, and it has become asphyxiating, stopped, fogged, and now a fog-breeding pestilence. And this louse has a powerful, sucking mouth, and with sharp teeth it grips our skin, through which it cuts with its pair of stylets. And it begins to suck our blood, injecting into it its germ, its microorganism. These rickettsi have been living off inside the body of this louse as parasite. The louse transfers them to us, and they pass through our fornix. They invade cells of our intestinal walls, multiply there until, after a few days, the cells burst and the rickettsi are released, and they are filling now all intestinal canal. He is in our entrails, he who does not want a speck of dust of dirt, who says the body is vile, only feed the soul. He has had only a collective understanding of us, and never fed, never cleaned us. Overcrowded, only one piece of clothing. The body is vile, and now the body is infected. And in a fever, he has not wanted our heat. And in whipping it out of us, we have lost our blood to his parasite infecting. And this fever, our delirium, we die. Populations of us die, writhing and frenzied. When he has spoken of Logos spirit, not in our body, the host has become human. We are the woman, now human, host to his louse. And now I go to the lyrical analysis. We will not stay in this fog cradle of disease of severing us from these bodies. Female body, we will be not trapped in it. We have moved through his splitting to our natural division, divided self-reflection, becoming conscience, befriended. We do not remain split, and his rickettsi do not cut and evade. We divide out within the larger ground. For we have built our resistance, which is not to resist him and become possessed. We have rooted ourselves, stripped older layers and rose until speaking condensed while held by her throughout. We build up our resistance. We can reside along and not go under and not come up against his fever. Yet instead we take the enormous energy and break out. We transmute his pestilence, recalling our Gateshead hate. Scatcherd reminder way to leave Miss Temple's chamber is embodied, not slattern body, not neglected body. Recalling appetite, this body romps, a way to bring out the lesson from her chambers and not become diseased. We do not pause to wonder why we have gotten free when so many others are possessed and killed by him. We do not let him stop up our canals. We keep ourselves well fed. Our cell walls are hardy, and they will not be invaded by the parasite. We take to the wood. Our way to move out from the temple is to the larger body, not without it. We know our liberty pertains to having entered Miss Temple's chamber, placing Gateshead as narrative there, sharing a seed cake ritual, repast of dead, many voices moving from stratosphere to heart, thus inspired, yet with Gateshead body narrated. We take our narrative to the wood through our appetite. The Brocklehurst tyranny, the denigration and prohibition of a female body, has become lived unconsciously by the Lowood group. His lesson of severance at the expense of body, Brocklehurst's refusal to recognize embodiment within differentiation, kills bodies. Lowood has been infected by starvation and neglected cold, the body objectified. And Brocklehurst's virulence is killing the girls who have not learned to pass him through long division without contamination, which would be to differentiate through conscience, speaking body. Perhaps we have relied too much on those walls. Perhaps we did not venture out enough. We did not rub up against the world, building body. Protected, we rose so high we could not sneer. We could not squint our eyes, clench those fists, and with deep breaths move out the narrative into world, not stay possessed by him in a fog cradle, but take the bread and cheese and move out to the proliferating greenery with our stories. Such rubbing against the world is exercise, romping body, blood-pumping surgings. We learn to breathe correctly in the air and light, which takes passing through the Lowood walls and moving friction with the worldly, even as recessed green. Here recessed wood has now become place of lessons of world, Marianne's worldly narrative. We get ready to break out to condensed secondary now as densening sublimated desire, when half the population of us is caught up by him, fevered. It sits in our stomach as a dull ache, this knowledge of her dying, all around abysmal chaos. We had followed her every move, sign. We are standing fixed at some point and we begin to shudder. Patient with our reactivity, she read us the sign within the fogged veranda. She has sat beside us. She has trimmed our inflation to size and moved along our natural contours with compassion, without cutting us into us. Without even cutting us in ways violating, she taught us lessons of scission, parting, distance, of inhibition, a natural division. It is not the typhus which has her. Helen did not catch the fever left by the Brocklehurst condition. She did not absorb his parasite, for she too has made it to Miss Temple's chamber. She had her own marble antidote to the Brocklehurst splittings, stylet, and whip. Her disease, however, colludes with him because she is wasting. Her adolescent body had wanted to ripen to fuller breast, and now it wastes. Here's the cough which caught Jane's attention in the first place. Consumption. Helen wastes away. She has an inspiration problem. Consuming inspiration. She has been inspiring in ways that for her body are consuming. She has been breathing in tubercle bacilli. They multiply by simple division. They leave their massive granulation cells and the tissue is injured. Here the nodular legion. The tissue is injured by nodule, and these granulation cells are degenerative. What was tissue organic? It bound our body, it held, adhered, yet hers has the injury. Wounded, it becomes dry, hard, a mass which does not adhere, crumbling node, this substance dry, cheese-like granulation cells of caseation, degeneration. Her breathing is off. Nodules, where there once was passages for air, for this oxygen to the blood, heart pulse regulated now by nodule. Body in the place of air. Bacilli consolidations and caseation. The tissue injured by a consuming inspiration. Inspiring, she became of the air, her body ethereal, angel herself, translucent wing, even as she stroked our hand. She animated us, and we entered her philosophies, her orbits, her orbs brilliant. We breathed calmly, even through impingements, pounding attempt at possession. She inspired us, and her stratospheres became our protection. It was gossamer, not resisting. Rising to the heavens in her breath, she breathed life into us of angels. We writhed, and then we rose above, danced with wording, shine of her eyes, our angels, messages of defect, messages of division and of death. She inspired until she lost enough body, so body in the lungs, place of air. Now body, attempting its lowering by symptomatically saying, what was of air must be body. And this message is from her conscience as friend, indicating that heart cannot get the blood sustaining, only bacilli filled, and the heart fails. The pulse not right, the heart fails. There's difficulty in desire, difficulty in loving, there's difficulty in hating. Helen cannot rub up against what would be of love, of hate. She stays isolated, above, secluded in inspiration. Difficulty in breathing. She cannot take in the love, and she cannot fume the hate. Difficulty in breathing. The blood not circulating but spitting. The pulse not right. She says no one will miss her when she is gone. No one will regret her leaving. When Jane heard from the nurse that Helen Burns was dying, quote, I experienced a shock of horror, then a strong thrill of grief, then a desire, a necessity to see her, and I asked in what room she lay, end quote. She is Jane's primary attachment, even grief thrills subtended by desire. And Helen cannot feel that desire, even as that one crawls beside her breast to breast. Miss Temple's love not felt, even as the crib has been placed beside the teacher's bed. Helen would have to have strong tissue to move out from the force of the Brocklehurst disease, to message her ardor individually, and she does not want it. No one will miss her, she says. To love and feed her own tissue, she would have to face her father's neglect, and she would have to hate her father, hate Miss Scatcherd, that is, find her own Gateshead narrative. She would have to engage in some sort of friction, as she would have to receive Jane's adoration, the loving care of Miss Temple. These flowers teach transmutation when we are trying to build our inner resistance and not hold on to his disease. We go to learn of their stamina. We see they take in the gaseous fumes of what carbon dioxide could be our death, and they transmute these fumes to their color crackling forth lily, poppy, pansy, rose, and crocus. They flower out, and from what could kill us, it is a gift of oxygen. We breathe in the fresh air of these plants are flourishing. I now have a lyrical section called chlorophyll. Bacteria of the tubercule are active in the presence of oxygen, yet they lack chlorophyll. Tubercule kill her body. Bacteria of the tubercule killing her body lack chlorophyll. In the presence of sunlight, chlorophyll converts carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates. Has the ability to transmute what would kill us into organic compound, life of cell wall tissue cellulose. Chlorophyll takes some roots, a desire to lower, to contact and suck in the earth fluids, and to break through as design of the internal forces take shape. The buds break open. And even as this flower soon begins browning or translucent in a withering, we inhale the pungent odor, see the stamina lower to its dust. We know this bloom passes through death force in its own time, is not lesioned, not asphyxiated, not coagulated, and spit. That ends that lyrical section. And now I will return to the lyrical analysis. Jane has enough of her own embodied hate, has found its narrative to remain well within the rampant Brocklehurst disease, and Helen goes as sacrifice. For each possession requires sacrifice and its transmutation. The Helen sacrifice to the transmutation of the Brocklehurst possession is the relinquishing of idealization of father. A hate, a friction, lowering him so this desire, which has deflected to coagulated lung or frenzy, becomes designated, then returned to body. Transmutation of father, God, law, above, to a delineation of heart's desire, the meaning of its distinct parts, takes Helen's sacrifice. Because keeping the word rising to him would not follow her own condensation lesson back to heart, wording once out to be incarnate. And here I have a lyrical section called Helen's Death. I was beside the fire, my book inspired, when she approached, sat alongside, she waiting for me to finish the final page, and then she took up my heat. Our dialogue engaged me. She was a little untaught girl, yet she stroked me with her desire to know, to penetrate the secrets. She always remained decent in it. She moved me, yet I could not know it. I never knew I had to be entering her blood to teach her the interior rhythm, its eloquence, and I assumed she held me due only to my sickness. We were in the temple together, exchanging histories and philosophies and nature's mysteries, fire of the temple impassioning minds. I was feverish. I wanted to be encircled by them both so I could learn how fever's soaring angel could become the palpable dialogue between us, yet I could not know such things then. Instead, I later lay coughing and whispered to her on returning to him, the consumed men who have had this blood cough for him, have left this world for him, have written their poetries as he carried them to their other sides, his penetration making them of the woman as yearning and receptive, and they found the poetry and made it manifest. Yet I leave empty-handed, leaving nothing of any of my wisdoms, the life fluids coagulated. I numbed, and I became, it was a trance of sorts. And I rose, adoring and somnolent, up to his arms, which became stronger for receiving me. His sons have returned their eloquence for seeking him, while we were held up. Not carried to any other side, but held up while the sons had a turn. We leave empty until a time of returning to her, no longer schoolgirl, wisp now tissue of some desire to meet our difference in likeness and not miss lying in a crib of consumption, white curtain covering. And that, now I'll return to the lyrical analysis. Our calling to carry the forces from marginal realms back, find the text within the recess, Helen has taught us, and her sacrifice is a lesson to sublime, is to condense, read impulse up in laconic conscience, speaking now desires heart to carry out, condense down, find density, incarnation of designation. The word that prefers instead to continue rise to him is the Helen sacrifice for incarnating conscience, mediating desire. Helen dies still a messenger, unable to draw her own life substance, yet responding to Jane's fervent questions, leading her to the borders of the lived world, as well as the human limit. Okay, so there ends the lyrical analysis of Chapter 9. Thank you for listening.